really interesting how people end up where they are in life. I mean, your journey is just extraordinary. I'm surprised you're still standing.
I get that a lot. I get asked, why am I still here? And I've got to say the same thing that I tell everybody is that I met my wife when we were 15. And, if you're willing to die for somebody, why aren't you willing to live for them? And that's what I do.
Bill Edgar's story begins similarly to most who suffer childhood sexual abuse, at home and at the hands of the only man who he ever knew as a father figure, his grandfather. He was only 7 years old. A struggling single parent, Bill's mother's precarious financial position necessitated her living with her father. When approached by a teacher to offer a scholarship for her son based on his soccer prowess at the local private boys' school, she jumped at the opportunity. Commencing his scholarship at age 13, initially as a day boy, the sexual abuse began almost immediately. His home life deteriorating, over the next year, Bill found refuge from the abuse at home at his new school, eventually becoming a boarder without the knowledge of the school and certainly the care of his family. Bill believes he was most definitely targeted. He names 3 of his abusers, all employed by the Southport School, who all subjected him to both physical and mental abuse, with one of them calling him a charity case and suffering from dyslexia, not worth teaching. After a particularly vicious attack from a teacher, at the age of 15, Bill ran away from the Southport School to live on the flip side of the glitzy streets of Surfers Paradise, where again, his street smarts found a home. It is from here he adopted the name, as he is now known on social media, as the Lost Boy of the Southport School. Staggeringly, to this day, Bill's disappearance was never noticed or reported to the police by either the Southport School or his mother. Despite enduring so many experiences most would not overcome, least of all survive, it turns out Bill is capable of more, much more. There's a happy, loving marriage of 35 years and a successful resume, including that of a notable entrepreneur, a private detective, and his latest achievement, author of the Coffin Confessor. It is against this backstory we talk to Bill Edgar today. It is a story of survival and redemption, of a life spent on the fringes of society on both sides of the law, and what that teaches you about living your best life, finding love, and understanding death.
Well, welcome everyone to another conversation. And today I have with me a very special guest and a very special book to talk about. His name is Bill Edgar and he's the Coffin Confessor, so I'm told. Welcome, Bill.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
So I've got to ask, where did the idea for the book come from? How did that happen? Who approached you? Did you go on to seek a publisher? Because it's an extraordinary read.
No, I was approached by a couple of publishing houses, and I was in negotiations with all 3 or 4 of them at the time. They found me through media. They were intrigued about the Coffin Confessor, but then they got more intrigued about the backstory. And it was Penguin Random House Australia that ended up, I really enjoyed talking to them and listening to them. And I was really comforted by the way they were going to approach the book. And they listened to me, which was really good.
And that's really why I'm talking to you today. It was the backstory that most intrigued me. And it's an extraordinary life. As a little boy, you had a real struggle and a huge betrayal. How have you dealt with that as you've moved forward with your life?
Um, I guess I did what, all victims do is you turn to drugs and drink, and then I was imprisoned and street kid and all those things. But something deep down came to me and just basically said, let's use this, all the bad stuff, to better yourself. Let's be better. And, that's what I do is I use all that, and I've turned my life totally around, and I use anything bad to empower me and to make good. But the main thing I think I did is I forgave myself. I didn't forgive anybody else. I never forgive anybody, and I never forget, but I actually forgave myself. It wasn't my fault. And once I did that, I was empowered. That just, it was incredible.
I often talk about that to people. When people say, I can never forgive, I can never forgive. And it's a very interesting concept. Was there a moment that you remember that you thought, this is not my fault? I've been betrayed, over and over again in the worst possible way.
Yeah, look, it was when I was sitting in prison in Bogger Road, a notorious prison in Queensland, and I was only 17. I just turned 17. So I was one of the youngest prisoners ever to be imprisoned there. And, I just started thinking what my life is going to be like, and whether it's worth even continuing my journey in my life. It was just terrible. Everything was fight, fight, fight. Even in jail, I fought for my life. And then something just came over me, and I went, enough's enough. I've had enough. I've got to make a decision. And my girlfriend I'd met when she was 15, we were at school. It's another story, but, and I met her, and she got pregnant, and I was really, I had people around me that were saying, just run, leave, don't worry about it. And I was like, well, you know what? I love this girl. I'm going to stay with her. So, it's a compounding of things that come into your life, and you either take them and use them, or to better yourself, or you let them destroy you. And I won't be destroyed.
Got a tear in my eye when you said that. So I'm just going to share with our listeners, the girl that was pregnant is now his wife of how many years? 30 odd years?
37, 38 years now, yeah.
And did love save you? Do you think that was the case?
Oh, definitely. She saved me. Absolutely. Without a doubt. I mean, she was going on to be an Olympic swimmer. I stole a school uniform and just walked into a school. I sat in a chair in front of this blonde-haired, green-eyed girl, and she turned to her friend and said, one day I'm going to marry him. It was just incredible. So for her, it was love at first sight. For me, it was like a savior. Someone just come and saved me, and she dedicated her life, and does so today, to keeping me alive. It's incredible.
So it's beautiful the way you talk about her in the book, and she's got my hero badge, so you can share that after this interview. I don't want to labour too much about the challenges you had as a victim and then a survivor, but I do want to talk a little bit about it, if that's okay. You were betrayed by your grandfather and then disclosed to a school teacher when you went to a school. What is your message to people today that perhaps are struggling with something similar? Because it's quite common for poly victims to actually to happen, and that sends people into an incredible downward spiral.
Mm. Yeah, I agree there for sure. My message to those people, to victims, is to become a survivor. But by doing that, you've got to yell, kick and scream. And that means, and I mean literally, yell, kick and scream. Announce who abused you. If it was your grandfather, then announce his name. If it was a teacher, announce his name. If it was any relative, you've really got to out them and out them so loud. And to be honest with you, I outed there was three perpetrators at the Southport school that abused me, plus my grandfather. It was a pedophile's playground. I understand that now. I didn't back then, obviously. But it was something that was so traumatic that I realised that by my voice and just yelling out their names to the media, to the Facebook, to everybody, I knew I was going to be sued. I knew I was going to be attacked. And I knew the Southport school was so powerful and had a lot of money that they were going to come after me. But they didn't. And they never, after 15, 16 years, nothing happened. And I kept announcing their names. And I kept thinking, well, why aren't they coming after me? Why isn't it defamation? Why aren't they suing me? I was threatened millions of times, but nothing ever happened. And I realized they knew. They knew what had happened to me. They knew all along. And it wasn't until this year that now it's gone to the Supreme Court, and we're still at the Supreme Court, just waiting what's going to happen next. But the school has now turned on its own teachers, the 3 teachers, and said, you know what, we're going to go them as well. So we're going to stand with Bill, and we're going to do this and that. And it's too late, way too late.
So I didn't know that. That's extraordinary. What was driving you? Accountability?
I think the thing that drove me the most was Peter Jackson was an old boy of the Southport School. He was a police officer. He was an Australian rugby league champion. He played for the Broncos. He played for Queensland. He played for Australia. He played all around the world. And in 1997, he came out and disclosed that he was sexually, physically, and mentally abused at the Southport School, and then took his own life. Now, I'd been struggling a lot prior to that. I had no idea he was abused at school. I thought I was the only one. So from 1997, from the day he died, is the day I took up the baton, and I said, you know what, there has to be more. And I just yelled, kicked and screamed and did what I did. And now I think there's over 133 boys that I've spoken to. A few have now been awarded, their payouts or apologies or whatever it is. Me, I want justice. I've always wanted justice. That's what I want. I want people to know that, this goes on, and it shouldn't be hidden. It should be exposed. It's terrible, and it's at the highest level, and it always has been, but let's just expose it. Let's turn the rocks over and kick them over, and let's expose it.
Not everyone has the bravery that you have, because some people are incredibly traumatized for life, and it's very difficult for them. I often talk about finding constructive anger. Anger can be very constructive if it's used properly. Is
Absolutely.
That what you think you found? You were just so outraged that no one listened to you, no one helped you, and enough was enough.
Yeah, part, but I think for me it was more, I didn't care anymore what happened to me. I didn't care of those people around me. I didn't care what was coming. I lived for the day, and the actual day is today. Like, I never worry about what's tomorrow or next week or next month, and I never talk about the past because it's too far back, and it's yesterday, it's gone. However, it's something that I got to a point where I just didn't care. And I just exposed everyone, and I just went, you know what? Don't care. You want to get upset about it? You did it. So I don't care anymore. So in a way, it could be a rage or an anger that, definitely within me that came out in certain traits and ways that weren't, like you said, revengeful in a way of going and beating them up or anything like that. Because, it's quite easy for me to go and destroy the people that hurt me. Quite easy. And the only reason I don't, and they should be thankful, is because my wife breathes today. If she wasn't here today, I wouldn't be here today, and neither would any perpetrator that hurt me.
Yeah, I get that from reading your book. So let's just talk a bit about some of the things without sharing too much of the book, because I've got to tell everyone, go out and buy it. You'll really enjoy it. Is you've been in jail. You've discovered your father was, a serious hardcore criminal. You've been homeless to the point of living in a tent. How did you manage to pick up and put one foot in front of the other and somehow become financially stable?
Oh, that's, again, my wife. She'd pick me up by the collar or by the ears and drag me along and say, get off your ass. You've got a child, you've got a family, you've got to get out there and do stuff, And I'd do every job you could think of. And I'd be coming home after a week, and she'd go, work next Monday. And I'd be going, no, I quit. Or I got angry at the boss and I left. And she'd go, why do you do that? And I don't know. I just can't work for anybody. I don't know if it's the authority thing or... And I always found working for myself pleasurable, and I love inventing stuff and creating stuff, where she's on the other side. she worked every day, and she continues to work, and that's what she did. So she was the one that was bringing in the wage all the time. And even though my work was bringing good money eventually, it was like 1 week we'd have, oh, wow, Bill earned $5,000, but the next 3 weeks he earned nothing. Yet my wife's wage was always stable. And it wasn't until 2 years ago that we've actually, amassed, we got houses, cars and things like that. But it was 2 years ago that I gave my wife a vintage typewriter at work. And I said, that's it, you've done enough.
Oh, wow. How lovely. What a big moment.
It was, very.
What a big moment. So, I mean, your childhood, which talks to the foundation of anyone's life, clearly interfered with your education and what's happened and a career. But somehow you managed, I mean, you went off and trained as a private investigator.
Yeah. I learnt to read, write and spell by the time I was about 30. My children were, the homework books, and I'd just sneak up at night and I'd read. And I was I got a scholarship to the Southport School. That's how I ended up there. I was living in government housing, and I won a sporting scholarship for soccer back then in 1980. I was 12 years old. I couldn't read, write or spell, but they didn't care about that because I played sport and I was very good at sport. I could pick up any ball, bat, you name it, and I'd be not just good at it, be brilliant at it. And they loved that. But I was never educated. And something about me is that I love education, but I see things differently. I am dyslexic. I am ADHD. I've got a lot of alphabets after my name. And I worked in various jobs, but I became a debt collector for a company, and I was collecting debts, and it was right in my field, harassing, intimidating and coercing money out of people over the phone, not even seeing these people. And it wasn't until a lady took her own life that I thought, wow, are we doing the right thing? And I started looking into the debt collection industry, and we weren't doing the right thing. We were purchasing debts for nothing, and half the debts were written off anyway through insurance, but we were still chasing people and hounding them. So I formed a business called Freedom from Debt Collectors, which still continues today. And what I did is I thought, well, I need some credentials behind me because I'm investigating these debts. So I went and studied, and that wasn't easy. I had my wife and even my son and daughter, they helped me, and I got through it. It was hard, but I did it. And I sat the exam a couple of times, obviously, but when I did pass, it was a big moment for me. And I became a private investigator, 15 years ago now. So it's been a great job.
So I just want to touch on it before we talk about the Coffin Confessor, because you, as part of, I didn't know this, you talk about it in the book, as part of becoming a private investigator, you have to have so many hours, and you worked with insurers and personal injury and surveillance. And what you probably don't know is we work a lot with injured workers, and we hear terrible, terrible, terrible stories. So is it ethical, what they do?
No, not at all. Not at all. Look, in the debt collection industry, I mean, it's regulated, but the regulators need regulating. It's that bad. As for chasing people and following them, I mean, if I have a husband or a wife phone me up and they say, oh, look, I'd like you to follow my partner because I think she's playing up or he's playing up, I'll tell them straight out, no, it's not worth it. If you're willing to get a PI in your marriage has failed. It's over. Walk away, move on. You don't need to know that crap unless it's for insurance purposes and you need to get some proof for the insurance. It's just not worth it. And these days, a lot of people, especially in the industry of PI as well, they set people up. I've actually been to a bar where a guy's been photographed and everything, and the girl's actually been paid a couple of drinks just to walk up to him, put her arm around him, have a drink with him, a couple of photos taken, and that's sent to his wife. Now, nothing else went on, nothing. She was just paid a couple of drinks to do that, and he lost his wife over that.
My goodness. Are you allowed to do that? Just go out into public and take photographs or follow people, or do you have to register with the police to say that you're actually doing that?
A private investigator, licensed private investigator can, but you want to have the facts and you want to be good at what you do, because at the end of the day, you can get exposed and you'll not only lose your license, but you can be charged for fraudulent activity and things like that. I mean, you're messing with people. So, yeah, it's pretty dangerous.
So that's the segue to the Coffin Confessor. How does a private investigator become a Coffin Confessor?
Total joke. Seriously, it was a joke. I told a dying man that I'd crash his funeral for him. That's all it was. And I was investigating some finances for this gentleman. His name was Graham. And he was close to death. And we were going through his finances. We found his accountant was ripping him off. And we settled all that. And then I was finishing up the job, and I said to him, well, that's it. And he says, well, I haven't got long to go, and thanks very much. And I said, well, you've got cancer. And he said, yeah. He says, it's terminal. I said, what are you going to do? You're going to have a funeral. And we started talking about death, the afterlife, and all that, as you do, and he said to me, he said, you know what? He says, I want to do something, but I don't know what. And I said, do a eulogy, do your own eulogy. He said, nah. He says, bloody family members see it before the funeral and they won't play it. And I said, oh, you know what? I could always crash your funeral for you. And I left it at that. And a couple of weeks later, I get this text from Graham, and it said, I'm taking you up on the offer. I'm going to give you 10 grand to do it too. And I sort of went, oh, you're kidding me. So I went back and saw Graham, and I said, well, what are we doing, mate? And he says, well, you're going to out my best mate whilst he's performing the eulogy at my funeral, and you're going to tell him and the audience that he's no friend of mine. He's been trying to get on with my wife while I'm on my deathbed. She's intimidated. She's scared. And I can't get out of bed to defend my family, and I'm absolutely horrified and upset. So out him at my funeral. And if my brother, his wife, and their daughter are attending the service, tell them to stand up and bugger off, because I haven't seen them in 30 years. So why are they there paying their respects? So the vultures in the family can go. I said, not a problem.
Were you nervous?
Oh, yeah, of course. At the start, I mean, I'm sitting, well, obviously you get to the funeral and there's a lot of mourners there, and you're sitting amongst family and friends, and people are saying, oh, how did you know Graham? And I'm like, oh, I worked with him at one stage. And this bloke walked up and he said, g'day, mate. He said, you know Graham well? I said, I knew him for a short time. And I said, how about you? How do you know him? He goes, oh, I'm his brother. And I went, oh, that's perfect. I didn't even have to find this guy. He was there. He was right in front of me. So I had to out him, which was good. But nerves, yes, it was nervous because you're interrupting a funeral. And I didn't know how it would go, but I did know through my investigations and my life experiences is that you have to get the crowd on your side. It's the most important thing to do first and foremost. So when I stood up and introduced myself, I'd say to people, Graham's laying in the coffin. He's your loved one. He's left things unsaid. This is what they are. If you want to hear what they are, I'm going to read them out. Sit down and listen. If you don't, bugger off, because this is going to happen. And like half the crowd's like, holy crap, yeah, we want to know what Graham's left unsaid. So everyone, shut up. So it was quite good, yeah.
So is these days, is the celebrant or the minister, or are they in on this is going to happen, or it's a total surprise?
Oh, no one knows what's going on. And the celebrants and the ministers and all that, they're not happy. But at the same time, they can sit down, shut up, or bugger off as well, because it's not their funeral. It's my client's funeral. And this is the problem that people have. Funerals aren't about the living. They're about the dead. And they've got to be respected. And if you're not respecting the deceased, then you're disrespecting them. And, you shouldn't be at their funeral. And it's like if somebody recently didn't want a religious funeral, but his mum and dad gave him a religious funeral. Now, when I interrupted that funeral, all his mates said, that's exactly right. He wasn't religious, didn't want a religious funeral. Although his mum and dad thought they were doing the right thing, what relationship did they have with their son if he was adamant he didn't want a religious funeral, but they still went ahead and gave him one,
So how do people find you?
Oh, nowadays, just Google Coffin Confessor. It's everywhere. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, there's 14,500 people in 20 minutes from the UK just downloaded and basically crashed my internet, everything, my computer. So, I got that many requests from around the world now. It's just, insane. So
requests to go to funerals overseas and gate crash?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I'll be, funeral crashing all over the world. And it's something that people have reached out and said, you've got to franchise this or you've got to do this. And I'm like, you know what? Anybody can be a funeral crasher. Anybody. You can go to a funeral of a loved one. If you're sitting there and you're listening to absolute BS and you don't accept it or you're not, stand up. Stand up and say something on behalf of your friend, your loved one, your family member, whoever it is. And if they're a real pig or a prick or whatever it was in life, stand up and tell people. Why are we always so nice at funerals about the deceased when the deceased wasn't that nice? We've got to change a few things in funerals, I think.
I totally agree with you. My dad died recently and he didn't want a funeral. And so he didn't have a funeral, but we had a little ceremony that he would have loved, and we know he would have loved it. And I think you're quite right. It is about respecting the wishes of the deceased. It's the most dignified thing you can ever do for anyone is to say goodbye in the way they want to say goodbye, not you.
No, exactly. And that's the thing. I mean, obviously we can all die at any moment, and the ones that are left behind have to arrange your funeral. But it's important to let people know what you actually want, and this is something we don't talk about because we're scared about talking about death, or we fear the unknown, or we fear that if we talk about it, it's going to happen. And I've just got to say to people, you know what, it can be a great thing in conversation, because at least you, as a person like myself, it's great because I can sit here and I can say, my wife knows everything I want for my funeral. Right? I mightn't die for another 20, 30, 40 years, but she knows exactly what I want. And if I want to change those things, I'll tell her. And it's the same with the kids. They're now married and they've got their own families, but they know exactly what I want. And that's great for me. And it should be great for everybody else to at least have some. It's a bit like when you register for your organ donation and all those type of things. Death is scary and it is bad, but you know what? It's coming. And no one's going out alive. It's coming.
We all get it. It's just the way it is. So what I'm really interested in, and you've probably got a really good observation of this, that people that reach out to you are so incomplete about something that's happening in their life, really incomplete. Is it different for everyone? Are some people frightened of speaking up or outraged, or is there a pattern?
I don't think it's so much of a pattern as, I got to say, every person on the planet's got a secret, right? It's just a matter of a skeleton in the closet. Do you want to let it out or not? Now, I think, a lot of people are saying, infidelity and crime and things like that I've done, and I'm ashamed and upset and I can't let it out while I'm alive and things like that, which is fine. And I'll go and crash a funeral. I'll let people know. However, obviously, I have an arrangement with my clients where I record us together and we get it all on tape, and then I have a contractual that they sign, and so that way I can't be litigated. But I guess the biggest thing, and when you say is it common or is it the same stories, I mean, everyone's got a different story, but I think it's more so that people are afraid to let things out while they're alive because of either they're going to hurt somebody, or I think personally they hurt themselves more. They're just like, I want to let this out, but if I do let it out now, I'm going to lose everyone around me. Where I'm dead, I'm still going to lose everyone around me, but at least I'm not there. It's a bit of a mic drop. It's crazy how it works, but it works for them. That's what they want, and that's what I provide. So
how do you feel after you've been to a funeral and you walk out? I mean, are you just sort of, is it a high? Yeah. Is it a funny feeling?
Well, actually what I do is I basically interrupt the service and I open an envelope and I read aloud the letter that's left. And then I place the letter back in the envelope and I place it on the coffin and I walk out. So I have no idea if the funeral continues. I don't stay for the wake, a few drinks or anything like that. I leave right after my job. I'm gone. And as I leave, I'm like, I always sort of say, to my client, and I say, job's done, and I'll just walk out and I'll drive off, but sometimes I think I'd love to be the fly on the wall. I'd love to stay and just see what happened. Did Graham's wife cheer? And I know Graham's best mate. I know he took off right after I told him to sit down, shut up or bugger off. He left. But did everyone? I'd love to hear some of the whispers and the talk and what went on, because it'd be intriguing to find out. But me, I really have no, and I've got to be honest with you, I have no care or concern for those left behind. I can't. My whole being and my whole job is about the deceased, no more.
Yeah, absolutely. You're very clear on who is your client and what your job is, and that comes across in your book. And also some of the heartfelt things that people have wanted to share. That story of that lady that her best friend, she'd had such a loving relationship towards her and never been able to share it. It must be really difficult. So sometimes you're being quite rough with them, and other times you're being quite caring. That's bizarre.
Yeah, I know. That is what it is, though. You know, it's the way it is. I mean, I've got to say that even now, I'm actually, you know, I go to people's homes and I clean their homes for them so that certain items don't get found by family and friends. I might even go get a will and bring it back to my client or things like that. But now I'm delivering gifts from beyond the grave. People are actually, you know, giving me a letter and a bottle of champagne or flowers I've got to go pick up, and I've got to deliver them on a certain anniversary of the person that died. Now, recently I did this to a gentleman in northern New South Wales, and his wife had died, I think it was 4 months ago. And I rock up at his door and I knock on the door and I say, "Excuse me, this is from your wife." You know, and he's just like, wow, you know, and that is an incredibly moving moment. So what I do is not just revenge or anything like that. It's good, bad, funny, and sad.
Yeah, it's life, isn't it?
It is.
You know,
it is life.
It's giving voice to those that have gone. So, what's the most bizarre circumstance you found yourself in?
Oh, definitely the pin pricking the body, using the body as a pin cushion because the person was terrified of being cremated alive. He needed somebody to go to his viewing and make sure he was actually dead. That's probably the most ridiculous and bizarre thing I've done. But I have placed a lot of items in coffins as well. People want their mobile phones with them. You'd think that was because they think they're going to wake up and they can communicate and everything else. Other people say no, they want to take it with them because it's full of memories. It's got all their photos and videos on it, and they want to take that with them. And I'm like, okay, so each to their own. You know, it's their funeral, and that's the thing we got to get across. It's not your funeral, it's theirs. If they want it, they get it.
So do you have a fee scale?
Yeah, I do. Like Graham set the fee at $10,000, obviously. And I'm glad he did, because it stopped people using my service for a couple $100 for revenge or just for a gimmick. But I have set the fee now at between $2,000 and $10,000, depending where I go and what I do. But they don't need the money where they're going, and I never get a complaint.
And how long? What's the window that they work with you? Is it close to death or?
Oh no, I've got people from all over the world that have sent me, you know, certain things that they want done at the funeral. They're not even terminally ill. They're not even close to death, but it's just an in case. And COVID was just ridiculous. How many people got in touch with me during COVID? You know, people were preparing, and that's a good thing for them to prepare. That's great. Some people I write back to and I just say, look, you've got a loving family. You tell me how loving they are. You know, do something for them, or buy a nice box, put it all in there, and tell them that that's what it is when you die. You know, and things like that. So I'm sharing all that type of stuff. But yeah, I've got to say it's become a global phenomenon, which is I'm rapt about, very happy about, and I'm looking forward to what comes next for sure.
Which leads me to, how did the media first start? I mean, did someone hear about you and told the media? How did that happen? Because it just exploded.
Yeah, someone recorded me at a funeral and sent it through to the media. And they couldn't believe that someone would do that at a funeral. And then I got a call from an agent over in the UK. And it was like Good Morning Britain, a show in Britain. And they said, you've got to come on, you've got to explain what you're doing. We've got this footage, we've got these photos. And so I went on, and I was on the segment for, I don't know, like 8 minutes, which is quite long for a morning show. And I was on for about 8 minutes, and I'd put my phone on silent, and I left it in the car, actually, and I'd gone into the studio in Brisbane and done this done this thing. And then there was hundreds of emails and thousands of text messages, and it was just ridiculous, absolutely bizarre. And then all the media and it was incredible, absolutely incredible.
So I believe a movie is in the wind. Is that true?
Yeah. So there's I've signed a contract for a movie with Paramount Pictures. They've discussed a actor who I spoke to only a couple of weeks ago. His name's Marlon Wayans. He's a very well-known actor. He was in White Chicks, and him and his brother, the Wayans brothers, they're quite well-known. He loves the Coffin Confessor and he'd love to play the role. However, I've spoken to a lot of people throughout, in the last year and a half about, what they want. And, there's a drama series in the making, a movie, a reality show. There's a lot going on. And I'm actually just starting my second book. So, yeah.
Are you? Okay. And is that part 2 of the Coffin Confessor?
Yeah, because I wrote the book, the Coffin Confessor, what I did is I sat and thought how wild the media can get and how bad, some people can be betrayed or I've got vultures in my own family and they come out. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to put everything out there. I'm not going to hide anything. I'm going to put it all in the book. And so I did that in a way that no one could come back at me and say, oh, I've got a story about Bill. He was abused, or he did jail, or he did this. And so I put myself right out there in the first book. So the second book is more about Coffin Confessors, my journey, where I'm going and where I'm heading, and it'll be a bit more lighthearted, a lot more fun, even though there's going to be some really sad stories about some people, and they do sound sad, but I got to tell you, when I'm sitting with these people and I'm telling them this is what's going to happen at your funeral, they get this smile on their face and they just know that it's going to be great. So I'm happy for them, and yeah, I'm very grateful for them actually.
I would be too. So how busy are you? Are you doing a funeral a week or more than that?
No, I'm doing more home sweeps lately. So a lot of elderly people, believe it or not, I didn't realise this, but an elderly person can have a slip or a fall at home. They can go to hospital and never return home.
That's right.
And I found that astonishing how often that happens, and that happens nearly every day. And so I get calls to go to their homes and clean them out. And, we're all human. I mean, you've got 80 to 90-year-old women that have sex toys and they want them removed because they're embarrassed about their loved ones finding them and things like that. So I'll go in and destroy them for them. And they're very appreciative. Or I might have to go get a will because, the siblings are starting to fight before the person's even in the ground, and they want to change their will. So I'm quite busy at doing those type of things. I go to a lot of viewings. Funeral crashes, I do probably, 1, 2 a month, things like that. It just depends. It's a wide range. Although I have a lot of people on my books, fortunately, they're all still alive. I mean, I'm not hoping they die anytime soon because I'm busy doing my own life as well. So there's a lot going on.
So this has given you a little time to breathe, I should imagine, that you've had many, many years of struggle, really, and all of a sudden, somehow life has reached a lovely flow for you. It sounds like you love what you do.
Oh, I love what I do. Yeah, absolutely. I love, how can I put it this way? I love giving back to my wife. I love paying her back. I love knowing that I can sit here now and, as God as my witness, if there is a God, say that, I've provided well for my family. My wife has her horses, I have cars, we've got houses, and I can sit back and go, you know what, we don't have to struggle anymore. It's been a long road. And people will say, and I've heard this before, people say to me, oh, look, he's got a vintage car. He must have got that just recently through the Coffin Confessor. No, you know what? I worked for 30 years to buy that car. Nothing's come from anything. It's hard work, and that's it. My wife did most of that. So, yeah, I'm happy to be able to pay back.
And 2 last questions. And I know we've got a very varied audience. For those that have actually been in trouble with the law and find it a blight on their career, What's your advice to them? How do they deal with that? Because you've got advice both as a private investigator and having been through that experience. And for those really life's too hard, what would you say to them?
Well, for the first part is that, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Life's too short to worry about, what you've done and trying to fix all that type of crap, because at the end of the day, it's what you want, and you will get it. If you want it bad enough, you will. You just strive until you get it. I know lawyers and barristers that have been in jail, and they become lawyers and barristers because of their time in jail. And it's something that people go, I can never get a good job. You really can. You just have to really believe. And it's not believing that you'll get the job or anything. You've got to believe in yourself. That's the most important thing, is to believe in yourself and your abilities. And I had no ability. I had to find it. My wife always said, everybody's born with something special. And I'd say, mine was sporting and it's gone. And she'd go, no, there's something special. And I'd say to her, what is it? Potential. I've got potential. And I'd always say, Bill's got potential, whatever. I've got potential. I'd walk off in an argument. We'd have an argument about something and how I should be really achieving and doing my stuff. And I'd say, I've got potential. Bugger off. I know, I get it. I'd be really upset with myself, but then I'd empower myself. And as for anybody that's struggling and on the verge of not wanting to continue, or doesn't know where they are, or even those living on the streets today, because there's a lot of people that are homeless and destitute. And you know what? It can be done. Now, I know it's not easy. And I know I used to hate listening to people that say, if I did it, you can do it. No, you know what? Because you did it, I ain't going to do it. That's what people have in their mindset. It's a stupid mindset to have. But at the same time, only you can do it and no one else, because I know, and I say this to my whole family, I say, once you leave this gate, no one cares about you. No one. Okay? We are the only people that will ever care and love you unconditionally. And for my own self, when I go out, I know that I am alone. No matter what, because it is you that must come first, not your wife and kids. You have to come first to provide for your wife and kids, and you've got to stay strong. And it's like people say to me, men's health, we don't get checked out. Why? Because we're too embarrassed, or we don't want to go to the doctors, or we just wait till it's too late. Well, you know what? If you want to be that way in mind, you're going to have to bloody look after your health when you're sick. So why not look after it now? And that's how my philosophy is in life, is just embrace everything, whether it's good, bad, whatever it is. You've got to embrace it and use it. And that's what I do. I use it.
So I wasn't going to ask this question, but I will as the last question. On that basis, what do you do to look after Bill?
I wake up every morning and look at my wife. That's enough.
Do you?
Yeah, that's enough for me. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I mean, wow. For me, I just enjoy life, as hard as it's been and as hard as it may get and everything else. I know that you're dead forever. Life's so short. We've got such a short time, and you look at people like that have done some amazing things, and like Olivia Newton-John, for instance, she recently passed. She's done amazing things, had an amazing life. Yeah, that's great. But she was dudded another 20 years, at least. She really was. People are saying the Queen died. It's a sad thing. She was 94. It's a beautiful thing to live that long. I hope I live that long and as healthy as she was. I mean, so, for me, what do? I live life, and I make sure that I turn every negative into a positive, and I don't let anybody tell me anything different. I do it for me.
Good for you. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.